When you vote in a presidential primary, you may think you're casting your vote for the candidate of your choice. But in reality, you're helping party leaders decide how many delegates who support your candidate will attend the nominating convention. Well, if that's confusing, you're in luck. We're going to break it down for you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Comcast Newsmakers On the Vote. I'm Robert Trainum. My guest today is Matt Mackowiak, Republican strategist and president of the Potomac Strategy Group. Matt, welcome to the program.
Good to be with you.
It's always good to see you. You know, our electoral process is so confusing. Obviously, one can win the popular vote, as we saw in 2000. George W. Bush won the Electoral College. Fast forward to today, as I mentioned a few moments ago, about the primary process. Yeah. Why is it so confusing?
Well,
at least to me.
Yeah, not sure I know the why. I mean, there's sort of the perception that the public has about how the process works, and then there's the reality that the insiders kind of know about how it actually works. You know, in terms of how candidates are actually nominated, that's done through the delegate process. It's not done through sort of the popular vote.
Why?
Well, you know, look, I mean, I think it's part of our sort of representative democracy. It's part of just sort of a clean way to carry out elections. You know, if you did it in other ways that may be less easy to manage. But you know, ultimately, it is about representative democracy. When you are voting in a primary or a caucus, you are voting to elect delegates to represent you, to represent your vote, your share of the vote, and then those individuals attend state conventions and national conventions to nominate candidates and to vote on the platform.
And technically speaking, we should also mention that the Republican convention is later on this year in 2012 in Tampa, Florida. The Democratic convention is in Charlotte, North Carolina. Technically speaking, the delegates who go to these conventions, the Republican and Democratic conventions, they can change their mind. So let's say hypothetically I am a delegate and I'm supporting Barack Obama, at least that's what I've pledged to do. Theoretically, when I get to the national convention in North Carolina, if the state party allows me to, I can change my vote, correct?
That's right, that's right. And this is always sort of a little bit of a gray area, but right. I mean, delegates are in many ways supposed to sort of represent the will of the voters in their constituency, in their state or in their district. But it's interesting, you know, if a candidate wins delegates in a state and then that candidate is not running for the nomination later, think about someone like Bachmann or Perry or Herman Cain or John Huntsman, who may have some small number of delegates. Think about maybe you know, a Ron Paul or someone who probably isn't going to end up being the nominee. Those folks are going to have delegates, and so this is where, you know, we haven't had a candidate in the Republican side not win on the first ballot at the convention since 1952, okay? So when you start hearing the words brokered convention, that's where that comes into play. If you get past that first ballot, you can have candidates that throw their delegates to someone else. You could have a new candidate come in out of nowhere as sort of a consensus choice. That's all based on the notion that delegates can change their mind, can do things differently, can switch their vote from one person to another person as the ballots go on.
I want to go back to the term brokered convention. I'm sure a lot of folks out there have heard that terminology, right, but they don't know exactly what that means. You touched upon it a few moments ago, but let's elaborate. What exactly happens during a brokered convention?
Right. Look, ultimately, you have to have at least this year, you have to have, it's 1144, I think, 1,144 delegates, I'm almost positive is the number, in 2012, in order to be the nominee. So until you've reached that point, you're not the nominee. And so a lot of times people are saying this nomination is over. You know, as of early February, Romney only had, you know, 100 or 200 delegates.
That's correct.
He needs 1,100. Until he reaches 1,100, he's not the nominee. If he reaches it during the primary, as McCain did in 2008, as George W. Bush did,
they become the
twice.
presumptive nominee.
Yeah, presumptive nominee. That's right. And essentially, they have such a lead,
correct,
and such strength that no one is strong enough to challenge them.
Correct.
Now, brokered convention comes into play where you don't have a candidate get the majority number of delegates on the first ballot. So if that happens, you go to a second ballot, third ballot. That's when things get interesting because candidates drop off, new candidates can come on. This was a very common thing in the 40s, 50s, 60s timeframe on the Democratic side, where you would have presidential candidates try to cut deals, work together. You often try to cut a deal with another person that's running and make them your vice president, so you'd pick up their delegates. This was very common back then. It's changed in the television era to some extent, but this time around, you know, it depends. Romney's got to get a strong majority in the primary, because if this thing goes to the convention, and if he's a weak candidate at that point, you could have a brokered convention where the party bosses, the major donors, some of the candidates come together and coalesce behind one person to be really the threat to Romney.
You mentioned party bosses. That's the second part of the interview I want to touch upon. Most people at home that are watching the program right now are thinking of the party boss smoking the cigar, drinking some alcohol behind closed doors, deciding who is going to be the next nominee and/or president of the United States. That's what's wrong with American politics. At least that's what the majority of people are saying. You know what? That top 1%, the party bosses are deciding my future. Is that fair in 2012? Assuming that happens.
No, but look, I mean, this social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook have revolutionized the power of the individual. It used to be that a very small number of people in the political process held an enormous amount of power. That's not true anymore. Now, the Citizens United decision has allowed for wealthy people to play a major role.
And for the benefit of our viewers, Citizens United, it's a Supreme Court case that came out in 2010.
That's right. That's allowed
Super PACs.
allowed corporate spending, non-disclosed donations, large donations to entities that are not tied directly to campaigns. And so that's allowed billionaires like Sheldon Adelson in Las Vegas, Foster Friess in Wyoming, to support super PACs to support one candidate. Sheldon Adelson has put $10 million in as of early 2012. Foster Friess has put several $1 million in. If those candidates weren't backstopping Santorum in Friess's case and Gingrich in Adelson's case, those campaigns would have been in very big trouble. Now, you're asking about party bosses. If this thing does go to the convention and if it is brokered, you could have a small number of high-level operatives and donors come together and try to achieve some type of consensus solution, whether that be for Romney or for someone else like a Jeb Bush or Chris Christie.
Matt Mackowiak, thank you very much for joining us.
Enjoyed it.
It's always fascinating. Good to see you.
Good.
And of course, thank you for joining us for this edition of Comcast Newsmakers on the Vote. I'm Robert Tranum. Have a great day, everybody. We'll see you next time.